Every generation has a role model and hero, but having the two in one who has spanned over many generations is a rarity, and one such person is Muhammad Ali. What was it about him that made people admire and respect him, and what can we as Muslims today learn from his life? Stay tuned for this and more only on today's Women's AM. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Women's AM. We hope that you're all taking advantage of this blessed month to improve yourselves, but to also make dua for the ummah. And during this blessed month, we'll be continuing to bring you interesting topics at our new time of 12 p.m. In this morning's show, we have our usual lineup of news, discussions and advice. And in today's show, we'll be looking at the legacy of Muhammad Ali and the lessons we can draw from his life, understanding who he was and how we can use his example to be better and to do better, inshallah. So let's get started. I'm Ayan, and this morning we have Sister Nusrat, a law graduate and a writer, and Sister Laika, a history student. Assalamu alaikum, sisters.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm not doing great.
Alhamdulillah. Do you know what? It was so chilly coming out this morning. I honestly felt so cold and such heavy downpour of rain. I thought, wow, I can't believe it's the middle of June and this is the weather we're having.
And we're going to have thunder later on as well.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, well, it's a good opportunity to make dua anyway. So I wanted to ask you, because we're so close to sort of summer break and inshallah you're going to be finishing uni very, very soon if you haven't already. Or you have, alhamdulillah. I just wanted to know, if money was not an object and you didn't have to worry about costs, what would be sort of your dream destination or your dream holiday? So I'll ask you, Laika.
I think with a little bit of, yeah, with money, I think I'd go to the Galapagos Islands because right now no one's allowed to visit there. You're only allowed to go on the outskirts, I believe. So I'd love to kind of go and find out where John Darwin got all of his ideas for evolution from.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so where there is no one, you want the isolation.
Yeah, I'm that kind of person who doesn't really like people that much. No, I'm just joking.
Well, that's nice. What about you, Nusrat?
I think for me, does it have to be something on Earth? Because I've always actually wondered what it would be like to travel outside of Earth and into actually space.
Okay.
So, yeah, to like see the moon or something like that. Or even, or if we can go past the times, the bounds of time, even to go back in time. So I would like to do things like go to space and stuff. I just have to get over my kind of apprehension about being outside of Earth. But once I get over that,
I think that would be amazing. I think that's not something I've ever thought about, going outside of Earth. But I think I could see the appeal of that, especially if you're looking down at Earth from such a great height. Yeah. It is incredible. Yeah. I think it's wonderful because no matter which angle you're at, you know, you can pray in whichever direction, which is kind of cool as well. Yeah. So it's kind of like you're in Mecca, but you're not. You're kind of looking above it. I think for me, if money was no object, for me, I would travel everywhere that I can, because there's so much to see. I think there's not one place that I could pick and say, this is the place that I ultimately just want to visit. Obviously, you know, after Hajj, that is what every Muslim aspires to do in their lifetime at least once. But putting that aside, I think everywhere, because there's just so much to see, so many different people to meet, so many different cultures. I think it'd be a shame to miss out any one place, to be honest. Yeah. But anyway, Jazakumullah khairan. Galapagos is one I haven't thought about. Maybe might put that on my wish list, inshallah. Well, it's now time to discuss this morning's stories in News Bites. What have you got for us this morning?
I've come across a headline that makes us question our levels of altruism. Accidental activists, the British women on the front line of the refugee crisis, and this was published in The Guardian. So we've got these two friends who, you know, had interesting jobs in London, had vibrant social lives, and generally had everything going for them. And they started to see the refugee crisis a lot more in the headlines, and they knew of people that were contributing towards raising money to try and help the plight of those who are refugees. And they said how doing this actually inspired them to themselves do something on bigger scale, like raising money, doing all that they could to try and help them. And I think reading through the article, it made me think of how whenever we see, despite living in a society where it's so individual-based, there are still people with altruistic ideals and qualities. And it's actually through sometimes seeing somebody else's plight that you can draw from yourself this kind of level of caring for one another and these initiatives that you never thought was actually maybe part of you, or at least to that extent. So I think this is quite heartwarming to see that there are people who still have that kind of feeling and that still want to help. And there are, you know, good people that would be charitable.
I think what's so amazing about it is that the women kind of, after a period of time, they were coming back and forth from Calais. And what they did is they kind of left their jobs and they full-time dedicated their time to the plight of refugees, which is amazing. And it was so inspirational to read that they got so many other people involved and they've become a much bigger organisation. So they started off grassroots and now they've kind of expanded and they're doing a lot more than any other big established organisation is doing. So it's ridiculous to see how much they've achieved. And we had a sister on the show back, can't even remember
a couple
when.
of months ago, yes, mashallah, who went out on her own to sort of the lesser-known Greek islands to kind of help out with the refugees there. I think that what's so beautiful about this article is that it highlights that every one of us is capable of doing something if we truly want to. And these women, you know, could have made the excuses of, you know, I've got a really high-flying job, you know, my career is very demanding, I don't have the time to do this, I'll just put some money somewhere, you know, to a charity that's already doing something and that'll be my bit done. And I think a lot of the times we do tend to have that attitude, you know, as human beings, you know, even within the, you know, the ummah, we don't think to ourselves, what can I practically do? What's feasible? You know, can I put the time aside to actually go out and do something physically myself to help out? And I think this kind of highlights that it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, you can do something. We're all capable of actually doing something that's actually positive and helpful in a more meaningful way rather than just chucking money at a problem.
Definitely. I think the service that you pay to other people is the rent that you pay both in this world and in the next. So I think generally we can all do something, and sometimes it's not just a case of I have to make sure that I'm okay and my family are okay, but what can you give to other people? And that's actually what will help you become not only a better person in this world, but even in the hereafter, when we look at it from the Islamic sense, that will come back to you and pay you dividends later on.
It's absolutely true. And I think as Muslims, we have to really kind of get on board with this and think to ourselves, you know, what can I do besides giving money? Alhamdulillah, I'm, you know, putting whatever I've received from Allah in my rizq towards causes that are going to be worthy. But what can I do besides this? And I think, especially within the month that we're in, blessed month of Ramadan, you know, everything is there for us to maximize this month and gain reward. So what can I do this Ramadan to actually help people around me? Get involved in initiatives that are in your local area. Go out and help feed the needy people who are on the streets. Go out and take part in initiatives that you wouldn't normally do.
So I think time, isn't
exactly, take advantage of it. So Jazakumullah khair for the article, sisters. Now on to our next story. Unwed Indian women are targeted in black market baby scams. Let's find out more about this.
Rescued from being sold. This infant is in intensive care after a raid on a private hospital believed to be supplying India's illegal baby market. Police say at least 5 newborns were sold from the clinic for around $1,500 each. Experts maintain the trade is a result of the red tape around legal adoptions, which pushes childless couples towards such criminal gangs. The director of the hospital in Gwalior City, however, denies any wrongdoing. India sees only a few thousand legal adoptions a year, while hundreds of cases of baby stealing and swapping are reported annually.
It's quite sad to see that. I think babies being sold off as commodities, but then I don't think it's that surprising. I think considering, especially if you're in a, you know, you're in a financial difficulty, especially if you're living in a state of poverty, you will do what you can to survive. And I think in a way, you can sympathise with the reasons why maybe some of these women are going to these clinics and giving away their babies. I don't know what you made of it, like.
I mean, this problem is not just in India, and the problem is not just selling off babies. You know, there's human trafficking in a general sense, organ trafficking, all that kind of stuff. And I just think you've got to think of the plight of these people, that they would go to that extent. But then you've also got to think that there's no kind of controls or like something regimented there to keep an eye on these hospitals. You wouldn't think that you would have to, but you know, when you're hearing in the news that this has happened over and over again, this is not the first time I've heard about this, unfortunately. So there really should be some kind of governmental control or like overseeing of anytime you've got people in another person's care.
Absolutely. And what did you make of it, Nusrat?
I think this is a question of how we value human life and our attitudes to poverty, and how, at a mass level, how the fact that somebody's in a very dire situation, they felt the need to do that. I mean, from an Islamic perspective, we're reminded within the Quran that we shouldn't kill our children for fear of poverty, and we shouldn't despair in that sense. And I feel that it's very sad that a child could potentially, upon being swapped, will lose out on their lineage, will lose out on all those kind of things because of poverty, or being with their parents because of poverty. So I think the issue of poverty is something, and redistribution of sources is something that we need to talk about, because there is more than enough for everybody's need, not so much for everybody's greed.
Poverty and corruption go hand in hand, I think.
Absolutely. I think this is something to kind of worth keeping an eye on, and hopefully, inshallah, we see some kind of change, because I think if it's been brought to light, then maybe, inshallah, they'll take steps to actually monitor what's going on and make sure that these women are not being taken advantage of, and also to know where these children are going as well. Like you said, there are issues of human trafficking as well. So, Jazakumullah khairan for your take on the morning stories. It is now time for a quick break, but we'll see you in a few minutes for today's Her Views. We'll be discussing the legacy of Muhammad Ali. But before we do go, here are some tips on the benefits of soaking your oats overnight. We'll see you after this. Assalamu alaikum.
We all know that the best meal of the day is breakfast, so most of us would go for porridge as an easy to prepare and filling one. But the question is, do we prepare it the right way without losing any vitamins and minerals? Porridge takes a good while for the body to digest, which means it releases its energy more slowly, keeping you feeling fuller for longer. Oats are easy to digest, and as the oats soak overnight, their digestibility improves greatly. The key has to do with what happens overnight as they soak. Their starches break down, which improves digestibility, and their natural phytic acid, which is greatly reduced, that makes them more easily absorbed by your body. Oats are higher in resistant starch. Resistant starch is a natural type of carbohydrate found in all starchy foods. It's been linked to increased satiety, improved weight, and even better digestion. So now you know that you should soak your oats before you cook. That way you get the best out of them.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome. You've just tuned into Women's AM. This morning I'm joined by Sister Nusrat and Sister Laika to discuss the legacy of Muhammad Ali. Alhamdulillah, he was an important figure and role model to all. Muhammad Ali meant different things to different people, but to everyone he was a hero, a man who you couldn't help but respect whether you agreed with him or not. He was an athlete, a civil rights activist, a husband and a father. In every aspect of his life, he had lessons to teach us all. So what lessons can we draw from his life and into our own? As always, this is a live show and we want to hear from you, so please do join the discussion by calling the number on your screen now, or you can tweet us at women's_AM and hashtag WAM15. So, Laika, I'm going to come to you. What was life for Muhammad Ali before his boxing career?
That's Tell us about a trick question, actually. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him first. His original name was Cassius Clay Jr. His dad was Cassius Clay Sr. and he was born in Louisville, Kentucky. His dad was actually a billboard sign painter, and he kind of said that he was an artist. His mum, so Cassius Clay was brought up within the Baptist church, and Cassius Clay's father was actually a Methodist. So he was brought up under, the Christian faith, and he was always going to church. And although he changed his faith later on in his life, he still had the kind of fundamental belief that there is one God. What we need to recognise is in Kentucky, it's a bit further away from the South, so he wasn't around rampant racism, but he was aware about racism. He did grow up around it, and he was aware that he wasn't allowed in certain parts of town. When I say, it was a trick question when he said, when does his boxing career start? He actually started boxing at the age of 12. That's when he actually started training. So he doesn't have a lot of time before his actual boxing career. In fact, there's a funny story. When he was born, his parents used to call him Gigi, and because when he was a baby, he always used to say Gigi, Gigi. And when he grew up, he kind of starts to get known as Golden Gloves, which really relates back to his baby days. Yeah, it's so cute. And later on, he actually had a whole controversy with the army, but we'll talk about that later on. Inshallah. That's just a bit of background about him.
So Nusrat, what can you sort of add to that in terms of like what we can learn about what his life was before, you know, kind of we all heard the name Muhammad Ali and before we kind of got to know him as an athlete?
Generally, he was actually a person, if we look at his actual life, he was a person that was very much in tune with his society and surroundings. And I think that's something that's very much needed in order for a person to really understand people. You need to be in tune with social interactions, social situation. And if he was born during a time where America was very much segregated. So he was aware of things like racism. He was aware that essentially we can talk about the issue of a glass ceiling, but back then it was very made clear the positions of who can go where and who can't. And he saw boxing and activism as kind of like a way that's kind of different. So he took up an interest that he chose to further. And I think his work ethic from a very young age proved that he was actually going to go somewhere. Many people who had been with him actually during his childhood even said that that person's actually going to go somewhere. And I think from an early age, people just knew he's actually a person who's probably going to become a torch for the rest of society as well. And many people in his neighbourhood reported as well that he had quite a good sense of humour and was quite loving. And
but I think it's incredible because, I mean, the whole thing that kind of spurred him on into boxing was just from an incident where his bike got stolen. And it's quite incredible how one event, you know, which everyone would have taken as something bad, you know, kind of goes to show you how it can, you know, turn into such a great opportunity. And so it was because of his bike being stolen that he went to find a cop who happened to be, you know, teaching boxing, and then who took him on and, you know, taught him what he needed to know and trained him. And it's quite incredible because it kind of reaffirms, you know, what Allah tells us in the Quran, that, you know, something that we perceive to be bad for us may actually be good for us, and something that we perceive to be good for us may actually be bad for us. So this is kind of like, you know, a living example of that, you know, where he thought that, oh my goodness, someone stole my bike, that's it, you know, I want to learn how to defend myself so that it doesn't happen again. And there you go, you have this huge legacy.
But that shows a lot about him because I just want to point out that his family was actually quite a high-standing family. So even with the black community in the US, they were kind of respected. So his dad was never picked on because he worked in the church also. So I just want to say that although his relationship with slavery wasn't direct because his paternal grandparents, they were literate, you know, they were never associated with slavery, he still had that history with, I may have been, even before these generations that I'm aware of, and he was always conscious about his black identity. And it just shows when his bike got stolen, he went to the police officer, he didn't try and roll up a fight himself. No, which is incredible.
It is incredible, and I think for a young boy as well, I think, you know, young boys are tend to be quite confrontational. Yeah. So it's quite amazing that he took, you know, sort of a smarter, a more grown-up approach to kind of trying to find a solution for his problems. But it marks sort of, you know, the kind of person that he would become. That he is somebody who wants to stand up for his rights, wants to do what is right, and to go about it in the right way. Yeah. And you know, it kind of it's sort of not a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. We don't really tend to say that as Muslims, but it's an indication of the person that he was to become. MashaAllah, we have a quote to kind of look at, to kind of showcase that, inshallah. So if we have a look, inshallah, in just a moment.
I think he decided very young to write his own life story. I think he decided before he could possibly have worked it all out, and before fate and time could work their will on him, he decided that he would not be ever disempowered. He decided that not his race, nor his place, nor the expectations of others, positive, negative, or otherwise, would strip from him the power to write his own story.
It's quite nice seeing that, because you can see that from what we've just been saying about his childhood and, you know, what he was like as a young man, that he was someone who truly believed in himself. And it's a testament, because when you believe in yourself, you know, you go on to achieve things. It's quite incredible. But Nusrat, I'm going to come to you. What was it about him during his boxing career that propelled him into stardom? Tell us about what it was, because I mean, we have stars, you know, those who came up before him, those who came after him in all sorts of sporting activities, but no one's kind of reached the sort of fame. Yeah. What was it about him?
I think it can really be narrowed down essentially to two things. But the first one is his work ethic. We've had stars that have come and go, but in order to actually solidify your position, you need to have a very good work ethic. And Muhammad Ali was a person who was very renowned for his work ethic and dedication. And that kind of translated into other things. So even before he embraced orthodox teachings of Islam, that concept of ihsan was already, or excellency in what you do, was already ingrained within him. He acted with a sense of urgency and was aware of this. In order to get better at something, you have to stick at it. And actually, there was one person who was actually a fan of Ali in training, and a student who actually said that he had hardcore dedication. For him, it was all about getting in there and doing your work. He was never into taking the easy way out, either go hard or go home. And that couldn't be truer than it is today. I mean, if we look at it, in order for you to get far and be propelled into stardom, you either have to go hard and get on your grind 100%. You have to make sure that even translates to other areas of your life. And another thing that he was known for and that propelled him was also the fact that he was very witty as well in terms of answering questions about himself or his religious beliefs. But he used his position as a person who was in the public eye and was successful, you know, because of having a lucrative boxing career for the greater good. And in order to solidify your position and still be adored by many people, you have to never forget where you came from. It's like, even though he'd been, you know, traveling and doing all these many great things, he still had Kentucky up here and he never forgot where he came from. And I think if you have that kind of person that doesn't lose that kind of disconnection, you'll go far. I mean, if we look at, for example, the fact that he even questioned the legitimacy of the Vietnam War from an ethical, moral, and even political perspective, not many people were doing that because we're looking at a time whereby if you were to really speak out, you would be on the hit list. I mean, there are many people on the Black Panther list that were on the hit list. We've got people like Angela Davis that were on the hit list. We've got people like Stokely Carmichael that were on the hit list. So for you to speak out and say, you know what, I really don't care, and I'm just going to stand for what I believe in, regardless of whether wealth is taken from me or not, and you're very much head fast in your goals, you're going to get far.
Yeah. And subhanAllah, it is quite incredible, and I think that's something that we can learn from today, because we think to ourselves that, oh my goodness, we're having such a rough time as Muslims, you know, there's a lot of negative media attention towards Muslims and Islam, you know, no one really ever highlights the positives, and I think he was somebody who highlighted the positives. He was somebody who, you know, even while everyone sort of hated on him, not everyone, but some people hated on him for his stance against the Vietnam War and called him unpatriotic, he didn't care, he stuck to it, and then when you look back at it now, you know, so many years on, you see that actually he was in the right. And there are so many people actually who were on his side and who said, well, you know what, he's right. What is the reason that we have to do this? And a lot of the times we don't tend to question the status quo. And I think this is something that we can take from his example in that particular aspect, is to question the status quo. Why are we doing this? Why do we think that this is right? Is it actually right? But even in terms of, like you said, you know, his excellencies, ihsan and everything that he did, I think this quote's been floating around since last week, which I thought was brilliant. And he said, I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. So that doesn't even just go for what you're doing, training athletically, but even as Muslims, when we look at this life, you know, suffer now, work hard for the akhirah, and then, you know, you live as a champion, inshallah, in the akhirah. So I think that's one lesson, inshallah. But we'll be coming back to the rest of this. We've had a really interesting discussion so far, but unfortunately, we do have to take a quick break, but don't go far, because when we return, we'll be continuing on with our discussion of the life of Muhammad Ali. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. This morning I'm joined by Sister Nusrat and Sister Laika to continue the discussion on the legacy of Muhammad Ali. Remember, if you have anything to share with us on this topic, please do call in. The number is on your screens now, or you can tweet us at women's_AM #WAM15. So before going on the break, we were talking about what it was about him that kind of propelled him in his boxing career, also special about him. And I think, Nusrat, you kind of touched upon a few of those points before we went to the break. If you want to continue with that.
I think continuing on with just using his fame for altruistic purposes, he was a person that, in addition to questioning the legitimacy of the Vietnam War, he didn't limit his civil rights or his kind of activism to just one group of people, and I think that's what made him appeal to many people. He incorporated, you know, a variety of tactics and strategies. But even questioning not only the status quo, but the equality of people. How are you going to go to Vietnam to fight for democracy and freedom when the very people or certain segments of society, namely Black Americans, were at the bottom of the totem pole economically and socially and politically, are facing that kind of oppression? So the fact that he even said that and didn't care whether people took his medals or not, you know, just shows to you the kind of fortitude and character that he had. And sadly, that if we see it in today's society, many of us are lacking. We need to basically have a stiff upper lip and not take things to heart and, you know, toughen up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think
what he said about himself was that he's not just a boxer. He was like, in an interview with Parkinson, he was like, I'm not just a boxer, I'm a political activist, you know, I'm a political figure, I inspire people. And that was because of his like charisma. His whole personality kind of shone through. You know, you spoke about other, you know, sporting achievements by other athletes, yeah, sorry, by other athletes. And that's because they only talk about, you know, their sport. They don't talk about political things. And with him, he was so open. He was an open book about his beliefs. And at a time where you could literally be lynched for having those beliefs, he was so kind of unshamedly Muslim as well. You know, his charisma was so kind of obvious within his boxing career. Whenever he fought, you could tell he was riling his opponent up by saying, you know, you're crap, like you can't go as fast as me. And when I was watching his interview, he was so funny, and I was watching with my dad and my granddad, and I was telling Nusrat that his humour kind of passes generations. It's not just me who found him funny. Like my granddad knew about him, and I was like, Nana, like how do you know about him? It's really weird. But he was like, no, he's such a famous person, and the stuff that he believed in, like we all kind of believe in it too. So there's just this connection that we have, even though he's so much older than we are. It was just incredible just watching his fights as well. And the fact that he was part of the nation, I think, is what made him so great at that time as well, because he said a lot of controversial things which he didn't necessarily believe in later on in his life. But he was a follower of Elijah Muhammad, and he was an unabashed follower of Elijah Muhammad. He was always like, yeah, I am a follower, and whatever he says, I kind of believe in it at the time. And I think that's what made him such a controversial figure and made him so, like, in the public eye. Everyone wanted to know, like, what does this man have to say? And he had a lot to say. If you watch his interviews with Parkinson throughout the years, Parkinson said about him, actually, he was like, he literally made the interview a circus. I couldn't have a word in edgeways, and that's what made him so kind of interesting, and you always want to keep up with what he has to say.
I think it's quite good that you mentioned the nation. I think a lot of the times, you know, we take him on as a figure of Orthodox Islam, you know, that he is a Sunni Muslim. But what made him, you know, at the beginning, gave him that voice was the nation of Islam. They are the ones who gave him that confidence, who gave him, you know, the confidence to stand up for what he believes and to give him that convictions. And I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, when you give someone, you know, the opportunity, the means, the tools in which they can believe themselves and defend themselves in a way that is positive. I think that is what they did, and you know, mashallah, they did a great job. And I think there's a lot to be said for what we can learn from them as well. You know, as Muslims, whatever denomination, is that we have to have that conviction, we have to have that belief, we have to kind of stand up for the things that we believe in. And I have a quote from Muhammad Ali, he said, he who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life. And he was a risk taker. You know, like we've said, he didn't care that he was going to lose his titles, his money. He didn't care that there was prospects of going to jail for his beliefs. He stood for his principles. And I think today, the fact that everyone has that respect and admiration for him, whether they agreed with him or not, is kind of a testament to the fact that, you know, he stuck to his principles. I mean, how many times do we see people, you know, famous people who, you know, who change their stance, you know, depending on which way the wind's blowing, you know? And you look back at these people and you think, what have they left behind, you know? What is their lasting legacy? And the truth is, they're pretty much forgotten about, or when people think of them, they just think, well, do you know, they weren't that important because they just went whichever way the, you know, wind was blowing, and they're not somebody you could trust in their views and their opinions, because you don't know that tomorrow they're going to say something completely different. So I think that's kind of a really sort of important thing that we can see from Muhammad Ali. But, you know, many remember him as an athlete, you know, and quite rightly so. But what was his role in the civil rights movement? What is it that he did at the time in civil rights movement that was so important, Sister Laika?
Well, first thing is he was, like I said, Black pride was at the centre of his belief, and white resistance. That was kind of his main kind of ethos at the time. And he, because of that, Nusrat mentioned it before, he refused to fight in the Vietnam War. And he said, I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. And in the US, war is viewed as like a man's duty for his kind of nation and for his country. And they said, you know, it's not about your personal affiliations. That's what the government was saying at the time. And he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, stripped of all his titles, and he was kind of left by himself. And he didn't care. And he went to interviews and he said, you know, we didn't know about Korea before the war. We didn't know about Vietnam before the war. All these places. But why aren't we raising awareness about, you know, Black pride? Why are we not talking about Black people and the struggles that they're facing? Whilst he was a follower of Orthodox Islam, you know, he spoke against the Nation of Islam, which is very, like we spoke about how he was a devout follower. After he became part of Orthodox Islam, he moved against the movement and he joined kind of the main kind of movement of civil rights with MLK, so with Martin Luther King, and he kind of became a figurehead for the movement itself. It wasn't necessarily exactly the small things that he did, it was the fact that he spoke up, and his voice was the main kind of backing towards his part of the civil rights movement. And he was actually opposing Floyd Patterson at the time over their beliefs of civil rights, which is very interesting as well. So just an incredible man.
It's true, and I think it made a lot of people uncomfortable at the time because, you know, while a lot of people were saying, yes, you know, we're going to go fight overseas because we're going to fight for what we believe in, the thing is that right at home, there were massive, massive problems that were not being addressed, and I think it made people feel uncomfortable. It made them look at themselves, and we have a clip from part of the interfaith event where Billy Crystal was talking about some of the things that he believed or thought about him, so let's have a look.
Forced us to take a look at ourselves. This brash young man who thrilled us, angered us, confused, and challenged us ultimately became a silent messenger of peace who taught us that life is best when you build bridges between people, not walls.
I think it's true. He did make everyone look at themselves and question, well, why is it okay to fight for what you believe in and what you think is right in a land that's not yours, and while you're not fighting for what is right in your own homeland? You know, look at what's going on in your own, you know, doorstep. And I think it's quite interesting to see people who are now thinking about that and actually saying, you know what, you know, there are certain things that we kind of have to take those difficult decisions. We have to take those steps to try and rectify issues that we can see happening right in front of our eyes before we move anywhere else. Sister Nusrat.
I think when we look at his contribution towards civil rights, Muhammad Ali was a person who was very pragmatic in his approach, and he incorporated different strategies, different kind of ways and worldviews into his operations that actually other people later adopt and follow his lead. And where he was at a time where the nation wanted a more separatist approach, and this is even within the teachings of the Muslim program of the Nation of Islam, Ali wanted a struggle that didn't just incorporate just Black America, but even working class people as well. Economic issues, socioeconomic disparities that were also being addressed. And I think even at that time, there were many people who were suffering. I mean, even though Medicaid was passed under the reign of people like JFK, there are people that couldn't even get health care as much, and socially were not, in terms of their jobs, weren't being taken care of. And he actually formed a promotional corporation called Mainbound Incorporative, which meant that in terms of his earning of the majority of his titles, people who were poor, particularly African Americans, could still benefit off that, and they can share in the profits of that. So I think that's something that's very noteworthy, in that he appealed to a mass range of people. He was also a person that was unapologetic about who he was, and he wasn't going to change anything. He said, you know what, this is me. I'm Muslim, I'm unapologetically Muslim, and I'm unapologetically Black. And I think this kind of pride helps people like, for example, Stokely Carmichael, the SNCC, where Muhammad Ali is known as saying, I'm the greatest, as we're the greatest, which meant that that was actually a good thing, to have pride in yourself and knowing where you come from. And I think because he had that strong connection to the civil rights movement and he didn't forget where he came from, there was one Mississippi organizer that actually said, when we were down there in these small, hot, dusty towns, in an atmosphere thick of fear, trying to organise folk whose grandparents were slaves. And here was this beautiful young man who made us proud to be us and made as proud to fight for our rights. He never made a person feel insignificant.
MashaAllah.
You are somebody.
MashaAllah. I think that goes a lot to say about how we should be behaving as well towards other people, and I think it's a beautiful example. So Jazakumullah khairan for that. We do have to take another break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be asking the sisters what inspiration Muhammad Ali has given them. We'll see you in just a few minutes, inshallah.
Sisters, hang on before you go on a break.
We have an exciting bit of news for you.
We've launched our new Women's AM Facebook page.
And we want you to help spread the word.
Each day, we'll be updating the page with behind-the-scenes clips and photos,
exclusive Women's AM updates,
competitions,
and much more.
So please go to Women's AM on Facebook,
find us,
like us,
and tell others about it.
So to be part of the WAM world,
and to stay connected,
go to our Facebook page and like us.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. I am still joined by Sister Nusrat and Laika, and we're talking about the legacy of Muhammad Ali and what we have to learn from him. Don't forget, if you have something to share with us on this topic, please do call in. The number is on your screen now, or you can tweet us at Women's AM, or Women's_AM, #WAM15. So we talked a lot about, Muhammad Ali and, his activism and the fact that he stood up for his principles. But how is it that he represented Islam in a time where many people didn't even know what Islam was about? So, Sister Laika, I'll come to you first.
Well, he didn't just represent Islam at that time. He has continued to represent Islam throughout his life. I mean, I think if you just think about how people have come out of the woodwork saying, R.I.P. Muhammad Ali when he passed away, people who you wouldn't have imagined to even know him or even care to think about him, he's represented Islam in a way where there was nothing that he said that was kind of weird or out of the box when he was representing Orthodox Islam. And whenever you think about a Muslim figurehead, you think of someone who's completely out of the box and saying political things. But not only was he saying political things at the time when he was interviewed, he was just saying, I believe in one God, and he was teaching about he was talking about the teaching of Islam. He even spoke at about hijab at one point, yes, saying that if I remember correctly, that if something is precious, it should be covered. And he spoke about his own daughters and used that as an example. That's just one of the examples where he spoke about Islam. There were so many other times where he just spoke about, the fact that there is a greater being. He asked the interviewer himself, he said, how do you think we're here? If this glass of water, who made the glass? And the guy was like, obviously someone made it. He's like, what if I told you no one made it? Would you believe me? And it was his kind of way of going that way. That was very odd and peculiar, but it was so kind of intriguing. I think his representation of Islam was one that, you can never forget because of his personality and the way he was.
I think Ali was a person that very much lived by his convictions, and even the Congress of Racial Equality, Floyd McKissick even said that Ali was one of the greatest living Americans because he was one of the few that actually lived by his convictions. So he didn't just talk the talk, he actually walked the walk. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest, sometimes that's one of the best ways of doing dawah. He actually lived his convictions, lived the fact that I believe in one God, or we should be fighting injustice and we should actually be fair to one another. He also was a person that spoke against, going against extreme tides. He was actually a very spiritual person, philosophical. He invited people to critically think about not only the oppressive practices that were operative in their society, but also your existence. How did you come about? So I think that was the way he articulated it. And he also articulated Islam in a way that it's a viable way of life for many people to follow, and in fact it would be something that's very beneficial to humanity in that sense.
He was photographed praying, and he made himself seen to be practicing, which I think is very different about Muhammad Ali. I mean, there are a lot of figures right now in the UK who, say they're a Muslim, but they make it very a private affair. But he was very kind of public about his faith, which is very different than the people we know today.
No, absolutely, and I think that's a brilliant example, because today, especially for young people, they find it very difficult to kind of embrace the fact that they are Muslim. And I think a lot of the times there's a lot of fear that's kind of haunting them in terms of, you know, if people know that I'm Muslim or if people perceive me to be as a practicing Muslim, then I'm going to have issues. People are going to have issues with me because there's so much negativity that's going around. I don't want people to know that I'm Muslim or that I am practicing Muslim. So I'll try and distance myself as much as possible. But then to have someone who's been through so much and yet still hold on to their faith so firmly, I think is a lesson for us, because at the end of the day, look at what's happened. You know, he's passed away now, may Allah grant him Jannah, and so many people came together to celebrate and commemorate his life and everything that he's done, you know, within his own life and also for others as well. And I think it's a beautiful example of, you know, how Allah, you know, enhances your status, you know, where, you know, you live by Allah and his messenger and what they've said, and Allah rewards you in this life and inshallah in the next. And I think the fact that it doesn't matter that he was hated at some point, look at how much he is loved now. You know, he didn't waver.
The controversy, so just so he could tackle it. You know, we want to kind of hide from the controversy. We don't want anyone to kind of point fingers at us. He wanted people to point fingers at him just so he could tackle it, just so he could make a scene out of it, so he could teach people not to behave that way. He was really much like a big figurehead, someone who was an actor, someone who liked the kind of drama and the circus around him.
Yeah, I think, and he used it to his advantage.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's what we need to do. We need to take advantage of the time and the place that we're living in and use that in a positive way. And we've got a clip, mashallah, from a few words that his wife has said.
He awoke every morning thinking about his own salvation, and he would often say, I just want to get to heaven, and I've got to do a lot of good deeds to get there. And I think Muhammad's hope is that his life provides some guidance on how we might achieve for all people what we aspire for ourselves and our families.
I think that was beautiful what she just said there. She said that he woke up every day thinking about his own salvation. And I think we tend to forget that. I think we get caught up with life and the dunya and all the drama that we forget about our akhirah. And I think the fact that, you know, he woke up every day saying that I want to go to heaven, so I've got to do as many deeds as possible, as good deeds as I can, I think is one lesson that we can take as well, that we're not here just to amuse ourselves, or we're not here for entertainment purposes. We're here for a purpose, and that is to worship Allah, and that's in everything that we do. And he did that through his, you know, through his sport, through his status. You know, he did that. He worshipped Allah in every way possible that he could. So it's a really beautiful example, mashallah. Jazakumullah khairan, sisters, for all your input there on this important discussion. Well, Muhammad Ali has had a legacy that will continue to live on despite his soul's departure, and every one of us, no matter our background, will find something from his life to inspire us and spur us on to be the best that we can be in whatever we do. Muhammad Ali showed us in a real way what ihsan, excellence, means, and we should all strive to be excellent. May Allah grant our brother the highest of Jannah, Ameen. It's been a great and informative discussion we've had this morning, but if you've missed any of today's show, you can catch up with the highlights from all this week on Sunday at 3 p.m. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of today's show, but tune in again tomorrow when we'll be discussing infidelity in Muslim marriages, so make sure you tune in live at 12 p.m. So that you tune in live for 12 p.m. for that, inshallah. But before we go, here's another reminder of this week's competition.
This week on Women's AM, we have another exciting competition for you. And up for grabs is a £150 voucher from Khadija Cosmetics. Khadija is the 100% natural halal French makeup brand with years of research to offer you ultra-performing, versatile and long-lasting formulas for a high-quality professional makeup. To be in with a chance to win this fantastic prize, all you have to do is answer the following question correctly. Which surah in the Quran starts with the letters Alif, Lam, Mim? Is it A, Surah Fatiha, B, Surah Yasin, C, Surah Nisa, or D, Surah Araf? To enter, send your answer to our Women's AM Facebook page or email us at womensam@islamchannel.tv along with your name and address and 2 original topics you would like the sisters to discuss. The deadline for entries is Friday 17th of June 2016 at 4 p.m. Please allow 28 days for delivery. All applicants need to be 18 and over and residing in the UK. Please note only 1 entry per person per household. A winner will be randomly selected from the correct entries and the winner's name will be announced on Monday's show. So get entering!
A great competition there, so make sure you enter. I'd like to say a Jazakumullah khairan to our sisters on the panel and of course to you at home, our viewers. Please remember to love for your brother what you love for yourself. Assalamu alaikum.